today, with the remaining time we have, and we do have a hard stop at 10 o'clock, we have the opportunity to learn more about fairs and festivals and the value to our local communities. We have several individuals with us to share a broad spectrum of the value and impact that fairs, events, festivals contribute to our communities. We will begin with Mike Szukhent, Executive Director with the Michigan Festivals and Events Association. Welcome, Mike, to the House Agriculture Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate the opportunity. Representatives, thank you. My name is Mike Szukhent. I'm the President and CEO of Michigan Festivals and Events Association. I represent the majority of the festivals and events throughout the state of Michigan. Our mission is to help the festivals and events organizers with their volunteer management, vendors, permitting, insurance, contracting, marketing, social media, and overall support. And some of you have already seen this presentation, Representative, because I did this in a Zoom meeting. Some of the events that we represent here at Michigan Festivals events are the National Cherry Festival in Traverse City, the Tulip Time Festival in Holland, Michigan, the American Thanksgiving Day Parade through downtown Detroit. And then I save Frankenmuth for last. And instead of calling a festival, Frankenmuth has a festival just about every single weekend, so we don't talk about any particular one because the list would go on and on. But the interesting thing is, and I did pull up some statistics, Frankenmuth is a community of 5,274 people. That is per the 2019 census. It is located 7 miles from the nearest expressway exit, exit 134 on I-75. And yet it is the #1 tourist destination in the state of Michigan with over 3 million visitors. It's the home of Bronner's Christmas Wonderland, Zender's Restaurant and Splash Village, Bavarian Inn Lodge and restaurants, and the River Place shops, and many, many more. And the reason why I saved that for last is because I wanted to talk about the economic impact of festivals and events. Festivals and events brings in visitors and guests from all over the state and from out of state and even from out of the country. We get a lot of visitors on the east side of the state that come from Canada to come and participate in the festivals and events. And they're spending their money in those restaurants and in those bars and those gift shops, and they're stimulating the economy. They're staying in our bed and breakfasts, our hotels, our motels, our campgrounds. And the study has shown, we had a study back in 2018, because we didn't want to use 2020 numbers, obviously, that the economic impact of festivals and events on the state's economy is $1 billion. $1 billion of economic impact statewide. And it also draws in, again, the same numbers, 18,372,224 participants annually to those festivals and events. In addition to that, festivals and events have contributed to nonprofit charities over $15.5 million in charitable donations. And unfortunately, those numbers are all based on 2018 because we didn't do anything in 2020, and 2019 numbers were hard to get when so many people were closed. So I just wanted to share that with the committee. We're short on time, so I've got some colleagues there that want to share their stories also. Any support that we can get to be able to open up Michigan to start being able to do some of these festivals and events. Everyone has worked very diligently on COVID preparedness and how to handle these events safely. And a little, if we could get some clarification on some of the guidelines. There seems to be a little bit of conflict as to attendance numbers based on definitions. So, Madam Chair, unless anyone has any questions for me, I will.
Thank you. So I'd like to take you back just for a moment, and you need additional clarification.
Yes.
And you've asked for clarification on attendance numbers and how that works. So for the longest time, outside numbers were 100 people were allowed to gather, right? And now we're at 300. Is that per event? Is that per area or section? So I'm thinking of a fairground. We have barns, we have a carnival area, we have a stadium, we have a variety of locations. How does one determine what area is to be included in that number allowed?
Madam Chair, I'd like to add more confusion to that, because if it is an entertainment or recreation facility, you can have up to 1,000 people. So then we come to the conclusion as to what is the definition. And a lot of it seems to be open to interpretation from the event planner, interpretation of the local municipality, interpretation of the local health department. And what we are finding in our industry is that the variations are very many. There's a lot of those.
Well, that's got to be very challenging, especially for the entities that move around. So you have one entity that's attending a variety of festivals to sell their food product or their entertainment piece. So we have a lot of confusion, and you have not been able to obtain the answers that you need.
We are also thankful for the regulations that came down last week. We view that as the door opening. There's a crack in the door, there's a light on the other side, and we are hopeful that with the continuation of vaccines, and the continuation of declining numbers, that we will see more relaxing of the regulations, so that we will be able to get back to something closer to normal. We're not saying that we're going to get back to normal. That's going to happen over time, but we just want to get back to something closer to normal.
Thank you for your insight and helping us to better understand the economic impact that you do make on our state, and thank you for that. Next, we have Trish Steele from Midland County Fair and Vice President of Michigan Association of Fairs and Exhibitions. Trish, please share with us your experiences at your local county fairs.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good
and committee
morning.
Members. Again, my name is Trish Steele, and I serve as the Fair Manager at the Midland County Fairgrounds and the Vice President of the Michigan Association of Fairs and Exhibitions. Thanks for allowing us to join you today. I was born and raised in Midland County. I'm a third-generation farmer, raising sheep, hay, fruit, and honey, and have enjoyed being an advocate for agriculture and agricultural education. Mike shared some powerful numbers with you regarding festivals and events, and the importance of those events to cities, counties, and the communities which host them. I'll share with you today some highlights of the economic impact of fairgrounds in each of our communities. Fairgrounds are the fabrics of our communities. Although Midland is only celebrating 83 years, many fairs have thrived for 100 or 150 years. In 2019, the Midland County Fair worked on an economic impact study with MSU's Center for Economic Analysis to determine our impact for our community. It was important as we talked with our leaders and our stakeholders. I'll share some information from that study, but with 86 fairs in Michigan, you can see how easy it is to compound and magnify these numbers for the whole state. In the standard year, we host about 375,000 people annually to our grounds for horse shows, livestock shows, festivals, weddings, and other specialty events. The findings show that on the lower bounds of the study, the economic impact is $3.7 million in new transactional money coming into our local economy each and every year. It has the equivalency of 53 jobs, and we think that's pretty special. Just by hosting our events, making ourselves whole, we provide to the community a minimum of 3.7 million new transactional dollars each and every year. The study further demonstrates the strong demand for the offerings made by so many fairgrounds. An example of how we measure impact is people travel to our facility from outside of our region. Those are the dollars we're counting. Our facility can cite a couple of recent examples. Where the Michigan Reining Horse Association had a recent show, they had guests from 12 states, even as far away as Florida. At a National Rabbit Show in 2016, people came to Midland from 26 states and Canada. It was a lot of rabbits. 1,400 rabbits was a significant show, and it was great. Yes?
Just get you to move your microphone just a tad closer to you. We want to hear about those rabbits. Thank you.
When these people visit, you know, they buy fuel, they stay in our hotels, they buy professional services, and they enjoy the amenities which we have to offer. Many people think that fairgrounds only operate for the week of the fair, but most have so many other events to help them earn revenue, to maintain their facilities, and to serve the greater good. Fairgrounds partner with a lot of organizations, many in a silent fashion, to help their communities as well. Our facility provides the use of our grounds for the Michigan State Police tactical training and has for almost a decade. It's important work that we help those who protect us. The fairgrounds are often called upon for emergency service efforts, staging, and in times of a pandemic. This past year, we've seen fairgrounds serve as drive-up testing facilities, vaccination sites, drive-up food pantries to help people in need. Even when fairgrounds are dormant, they're providing winter storage, a valuable service to their communities for people who would like to store their personal boats, cars, campers, and it allows the fairgrounds to earn additional revenue. When the dams failed and flooding devastated Midland, Gladwin, and other counties, the fairgrounds was asked to open as an emergency shelter. With the help of our health department, those people who were displaced had a place to stay that night. It took efforts of many to de-winterize the campgrounds and bathhouses, put in new safety protocols for COVID-19, and help these people in such a challenging time because we were closed. We were following the rules. We served as a shelter for more than 2 months until people could find more permanent housing and put in place help for those families. We provided warehouse space. There were so many donations for household goods that several volunteer groups needed a place to store their items before they could get them to people when they could return to a home. We did all that we could to help. Being able to operate and host events year-round has helped our fair as a private nonprofit be self-sufficient, help our community, and the youth and all who participate in our fair. We have to earn a revenue by hosting events. It allows us to pay our premiums and host our fair. Last week, you heard about the importance of youth at our fairs. In 2020, our fair in Midland, we held a youth show similar to the ones referenced last week. While we know it was a great investment in our youth, I think it's important to share that it's cost our fair board over $41,000 to provide it in a safe and effective manner, knowing the operating guidelines were in place at that time. We had to pay for extra sanitizing, judging, security premiums, and all the other expenses to make it happen, and we were glad to do so. In the last year, our fairgrounds has been greatly reduced by its revenue and its income or ability to operate. We have about $1 million budget, and we lost 67% revenue last year. We were able to provide this important learning event to our young people because we had savings generated from previous year's events. The board of directors continues to certainly be willing to invest in youth in our community, but it highlights that funds are necessary to deliver an event such as a fair, even if it's in a modified fashion. It doesn't necessarily get cheaper by scale. Many fairs work with other nonprofits and fundraisers for fundraisers and meeting spaces. We support 4-H, Studley Grange, and other civic groups to make a community strong. At fairs, you'll see Lions clubs, Rotaries, marching bands, school sports, all participating to raise money. That could be parking cars, hosting bingo, selling raffle, running food booths, or more. And when our restaurants were shuttered earlier this year, many fair food vendors worked with their county health departments to get up and running on street corners and communities, or they worked with their fairgrounds for a wave of what we called the fair food drive-thrus across the state. It was a creative solution to give people a sense of familiar and have fun while vendors were able to earn some revenue. We rely heavily on our partners, such as amusement companies, food concessionaires, merchants, and sponsors in order to deliver an annual fair. It's an entire supply chain of resources and revenues that, when interrupted, or in the case of 2020, halted, had lasting effects on the ability of some fairs to continue to invest in the way they had in the past. Many will struggle to plan for the future as they rely on those revenues from fair to carry them into the next season of events. Amusement companies share the revenues with fairs when they operate there. While these revenue structures will differ for fairs, it could be 25% of the revenue for the week, or 10% in some cases of their annual revenue. For us, our amusement contribution is over $100,000 of our $400,000 revenue from the fair. It's significant. Our partners are critical to the future success of fairs and festivals. And you'll hear from Doug Burtch next as we work together to find our way to continue our fair tradition. Collectively, we are extremely proud to be the fabric of the community and to enhance the quality of life where we work and live. We look forward to delivering our fairs for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish, and thank you to you and your board, Midland County Fair Board, for making the decision to take those hard-earned savings dollars when you're experiencing a year where you have 67% loss of revenue, but yet you were willing to put up the $41,000 needed for those youth activities. So kudos for you for prioritizing, keeping everyone safe at the same time. So thank you for sharing your story. And lastly today, we have Doug Burtch. Doug is with TJ Schmidt Amusement, Outdoor Amusement Business and Association, and the Michigan Association of Fairs and Exhibitions. Welcome, Doug.
Good morning. I appreciate that, Madam Chair and committee members. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'll speak quickly because I know you have a hard stop at 10 o'clock. So I'll pick up where my colleagues left off and talk a little bit about the carnival and amusement business. And then I'd like to talk a little bit how we've been impacted and exactly how we got to where we are and where we think we might be headed. I think that's going to be enlightening for all of you. As Trish said, when we operate carnivals, when we contract with a fair or festival or event, we share our revenue. So it's not a contract where the fair board hires us and then pays us a stipend. It's quite the opposite. We go in and generate revenue and then give back a percentage of those operating revenue back to the fair or festival. And that's how, as Trish pointed out, many of them survive. And at different levels, as different communities, obviously the different fair boards and different fairgrounds, our revenue can be, in some cases, as much as 50 to 60% of their entire operating budget. When you think of smaller community fairs, that really one of the only events they have is a fair and maybe winter storage and a couple of other smaller events. They're not in the size communities such as Midland. It is very significant that we're able to be there and operate with the capacity that allows us to generate enough income to both pay our bills as a business and run our business model and then give those contributions back to the fair board. We don't just work with fair boards. Obviously, we work with Lions clubs and Kiwanis and Rotary clubs at different festivals, chambers of commerce, and so forth as we move forward. The carnival industry is a lot like farming, and I think it's uniquely tied to agriculture in as much as we're very generational. Most of the carnival companies that operate throughout the country, and specifically here in the state of Michigan, some of them are in their fifth and sixth generation of family ownership of those traveling amusement companies. And unfortunately, there aren't too many people that are out there clamoring to get into the carnival business. People aren't buying carnivals when they go out of business. And so the loss of a carnival doing business in a state is very significant because then you're going to have 20 to 25 weeks that we all operate with a solid list of events that suddenly won't have an amusement provider. And with the amount of headaches we have with Department of Transportation, a lot of us are trying to stay in one state, not be going to a bunch of other states and trying to deal with the transportation and the health departments and so forth. So what we've done is most of us and our business, we're seasonal. And I think that's really important to remember as we go through this now. We closed for business in October of 2019, the first part of October. And most of what the carnivals do at that point is take stock in what they want to do with their capital improvements. And we all have shops and facilities where we take rides and we look at things like safety orders. We look at refurbishing them cosmetically. And it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that we put in the off season to keep those rides, first of all, safe and in compliance, but also, to deal with cosmetics and upgrades and if we want to make any capital investments. So we all started that procedure, as you can imagine. And we were, most of us in March, getting ready to probably get into our lines of credit, recognizing that in April we would be open for business and we would then have our 30 weeks or so of revenue. And of course, the pandemic hit, and there was the 3 weeks to slow the spread or flatten the curve. And we started the game of, well, surely by May 1st we're going to be open. Surely by June 1st we're going to be open. Hopefully by the 4th of July. And then we started to ask ourselves, what if we don't get open until the 4th of July? That's half of our operating season is gone. How are we going to scale up? How are we going to find employees? What is the protocol and so forth? It became very evident early on that these events were going to cancel, and they were going to cancel in full. And we were looking at what is the equivalent of any other business, a full operating year's loss of revenue, after just having spent down our fund balance and preparing to get into lines of credit. And this was a common denominator with all the carnivals. I serve on the Outdoor Amusement Business Association Board of Directors and take those phone calls regularly about, what are we going to do here? So we got to that point, and at about that time, the federal government was issuing payroll protection loans, SBA loans, and of course, our CPAs and attorneys were saying, take everything you can get right now because we don't know what's going to happen. And so most of us did, in fact, take a payroll protection loan in the first round. And then we started to wonder, well, can we bring employees on? Should we bring employees on? Are we going to need this payroll protection to be just that, a loan? Are we going to need that nest egg? Because if we just put employees on for the purpose of keeping them on, and we don't ever get a chance to open, how are we going to get from October 2020 to April of 2021? Where are we going to generate this revenue? And so most of us then ended up in the loan, a non-forgivable loan, or a very small portion of it being forgivable of that payroll protection loan. There has not been any opportunity for grants. There have not been any opportunities that we have qualified or fallen into in a grant program. It is not for lack of effort. We just recently were lobbying very hard at the federal level in the stimulus package to get support from both our Democratic senators in this state, Debbie Stabenow and Mr. Peters, to take up what was an amendment offered by an Indiana senator to include us in the Shuttered Venues Act. Because as you know, there's going to be billions of dollars coming to the state of Michigan, and we want to see some of that appropriated in some sort of program that would help the fairgrounds, help the festival grounds, and the carnivals and circuses that literally have been shuttered completely, 100%. So when you talk about a 67% loss of revenue, we're talking about 100% loss of revenue. At this stage, we're trying to navigate the health and safety orders moving forward. And I really want to commend Director Hertel's office. They have been willing, and it's been refreshing that they've taken our calls and they've listened to our concerns that no more than 100 is not conducive. And had it stayed at that number, we would have seen the cancellation of our April, May, and June dates already, and there goes half of another operating season. And I don't have to tell you that we've asked our creditors, to defer loans. We've had to have our insurance company make concessions. And so for my company alone in deferments, it's cost me $20,000 in deferred interest and loans just on one note, from 1 year of deferments. And you start to think about, you might have to do that again. I don't think there's any business that has in their fund balance or in their cash on hand the ability to run 2 consecutive years, calendar years for us, with no income and stay solvent. And so the move to the no more than 1,000 capacity was significant and substantial. It is not sustainable, obviously, moving forward. But what it did do is it allowed municipalities and local health departments to have an opportunity to at least move forward with a permitting process, having looked at our COVID mitigation plans and the event COVID mitigation plans and saying, how are you going to comply with no more than 1,000? There is, of course, need for clarification, as there always is in these type of measures and bills. And health orders as to exactly what is an event, exactly what is the area, because it was no more than so many in a distinct space. Well, what is the distinct space, and so forth. So as we move forward, we support, obviously, the youth that you heard from last year. Our revenue that we provide to all these events goes right back into the Lions Club, into the fair boards, which they turn around and get back into the youth education programs and the community efforts that they put on throughout the year. I have got Lions Clubs that are telling me if we don't get a festival, this year, the club is going to have to fold. We're broke. We are insolvent. Because not only was their festival canceled, but they couldn't have their pancake suppers, they couldn't have bingo, and so forth. So all of their fundraising efforts have almost been distinguished. No matter how creative you get, you cannot replace and replenish enough of your operating budget with just a few small online events or whatever you're able to do. So we're prepared as an industry to move forward safely. and we're happy and excited about where we think we are headed, but there's a lot of work to do yet. And the danger is we are all facing insolvency with just one or two bad decisions, and those decisions are out of our control. I am not in the position of having deferred loans and having to take on debt and borrow my way out of a situation because of bad business decisions that we've made. The pandemic has come in and everybody's done their absolute best, but if we cannot move forward, if we cannot find a path to getting open at some reasonable capacity that will turn a good enough revenue and profit to stay solvent, it will be the end of an industry. And that there is no way around that. So it's important and that you hear our stories, and we hope that moving forward, whether that be in ag appropriations or whether that be in another subcommittee, that there is a chance with the money coming in that we can find a supplemental, because with the capacity restrictions still not being sustainable, we're going to need a supplemental even for this year, notwithstanding that we're trying to dig out of a complete operating season that's been lost. So I wanted to yield back as much time as I could for some of your questions, and I know that you've got a hard stop. So I've kind of given you the synopsis. I didn't cover everything that I wanted to because I know we ran a little long, but in general, that's a synopsis of the amusement industry and our partnership and relations with the fairs and festivals in the state.
Thank you so much, Doug, and thank you to all three of our guests for being so cognizant of the time. You guys did an awesome job. So you represent TJ Schmidt Amusement. How many states do you provide a service or contract with?
We contract solely in the state of Michigan, and we are operating from the 1st of April to the 1st of October. So
Okay.
it's about 30 events.
And how many other groups or entities provide the same service that you do in Michigan?
There's only about 12, and of the 12, I would say 8 of them are on that same route, and then there's about 4 of them that deal in smaller numbers, so they might only have 5 or 6 weeks that they're in the state of Michigan.
Okay. Thank you for that. And thank you also for the kudos to Director Hertel. Our goal is for everyone's voice to be heard, so we're pleased to hear that happened. Representative Puri?
Thank you, Chair.
Of course.
Just a quick question. Thank you for coming in today. Tremendous amount of empathy for your industry and what it's going through. Just one quick thing. On the payroll protection program loans that you mentioned that those were not forgiven. For the large part, most PPP loans were forgiven. And so I was just wondering if you could provide clarity as to why you were not able to get forgiveness on those loans.
Sure, because on the first round, we're not talking about the second round. The first round, when you apply forgiveness, there is a formula that you need 60% to have been spent on payroll expenses, and those payroll expenses are only wages and health care. And so in our situation, we had a very minimal payroll and health, obviously the health care that we do keep year round. So when you borrow, let's say $100,000 and only $20,000 of it was used on the health care during that time, you don't meet the 60% threshold and the rest of it automatically becomes a loan.
No, the other 40% is eligible for forgiveness as well, as long as it meets the other bucket.
Correct, but again, so the way the formula worked with the bank, we were only able to get, and again, the 40%, I think we didn't spend the entirety of 40% because your utilities and rent and so forth don't always equal that high. It doesn't meet the threshold of the total amount of the loan. So some of it, I'm sorry if I misled you, some of it is forgiven, absolutely. But in total, we weren't able to get the entire loan forgiven. So if you borrowed $100,000, you might still be on the hook for a $50,000 loan moving forward.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that.
And on that line of workforce, you're talking about October 2019 closing down with right around the corner, April 2021. That's 18 months. What is the likelihood that your workforce will return after that period of time, rather than those individuals finding employment elsewhere?
It's been very difficult. In my situation and several of my colleagues that I've talked to, I'll speak specifically to mine, we have about 12 staff members that have been with us for 20 years. And they stay with us through the winter, and they collect unemployment, and they liked that lifestyle. They couldn't hang on, and we're down to 2 of those 12 left of the workforce, and so we're having job fairs and doing everything you can to employee retention is impossible, and you can't blame the employees when you can't offer them employment. there's not much you can do. Your hands are tied.
Thank you for that insight. Representative Brendan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When, in a typical year prior to 2020, how many jobs are provided by your industry?
Well, I don't know if I have the industry number in the state of Michigan, but we all average 100 to 200 employees at the height of our season. So if you do the math, at 12 carnivals, I mean, you're talking a significant amount, 20,000, people. And that doesn't take into account the independent operators. So there are lots of people, when you go out and buy your French fries from a food stand or a pizza or a pretzel, those are independent operators, independently operating of the carnival. And there's a whole another group of those folks. So I would estimate it somewhere between the 20,000 to 30,000 range of employment in the state.
I appreciate you being here today, and I understand what you do in the communities. I'm from northern Michigan, and when the fair comes to town, the kids' eyes light up, and it is a huge draw. For our small town, it brings people in from all areas, and so we really understand what your industry does for the entertainment industry and the fact that you run a pretty tight ship. So thank you.
Thank you.
And in addition to that, I think we need to commend the nonprofit association and relationship, that collaborative effort with all of your presentations and your point. Our nonprofits are hurting these days, and the services that they are able to, with collaboration with you and your entities, it makes our entire communities a better place. So thank you for that as well. Seeing no other comments, seeing no other questions, seeing no other items to bring before the committee, we will stand adjourned.